The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as Lily pushed it open with both small hands, the winter wind slipping in behind her before the door closed again. The warmth wrapped around her instantly, rich with the scent of roasted coffee beans, steamed milk, and something sweet baking in the oven. Outside, the streets of New York City were powdered with fresh snow, the sidewalks glittering under a pale afternoon sun. Inside, everything felt golden. Lily stamped her boots carefully on the mat, brushing snow from her thin coat. In her mittened fist was a single, crumpled dollar bill. It had been folded and unfolded so many times the edges were soft. Her grandmother had pressed it into her palm that morning. "For something sweet," she had said. "But only if you really want it." Lily really wanted the chocolate chip cookie in the glass display case. It was enormous, dotted with glossy chunks of chocolate that looked like tiny treasures. She had imagined breaking it in half and saving a piece for later, letting it melt slowly on her tongue while she did her homework. She stood in line, rocking slightly on her heels, watching the grown-ups order complicated drinks with names she couldn't pronounce. A tall man in a dark charcoal coat stood at the counter. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. A silver watch peeked from beneath his sleeve, catching the light. He didn't look like someone who had problems. But Lily noticed something else. His shoulders were slumped. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes. He stared at his phone as if it had just betrayed him. "I'm sorry, sir," the barista said, her voice polite but strained. "Your card isn't going through." The man frowned slightly. "That's impossible." She tried again. The machine beeped. "It says declined." A murmur rippled through the line. He stepped aside, jaw tight. "It must be a bank error," he muttered, checking his screen. "I'll fix it." Two customers behind Lily exchanged looks. "If you can't afford coffee here," one whispered. Lily's stomach tightened. The man wasn't angry. He looked embarrassed. And more than that, tired in a way she recognized. It was the same look her mother had some nights after her second job, when bills sat unopened on the kitchen table. The man exhaled slowly and rubbed his forehead. Lily looked at the cookie. Then at the dollar in her hand. Then at the man. She stepped out of line. The movement was so small, but it felt enormous to her. She walked up to the counter and tugged gently on the barista's sleeve. "Excuse me," she said softly, holding up her wrinkled bill. "Can this buy him a small coffee?" The cafe went still. The barista blinked down at her. "Sweetheart, that's your money." Lily nodded seriously. "I know, but he looks like he needs it more." The man turned, surprised. No, he said quickly. "I couldn't possibly take a child's money." "You can," Lily replied with quiet certainty. "My grandma says coffee helps sad people think better." A few customers smiled. One woman covered her mouth. The barista hesitated only a second before ringing up the smallest coffee on the menu. "One small house blend," she announced, taking Lily's dollar. The man stared at the little girl as if trying to understand something bigger than the moment. Slowly, he crouched down until they were eye level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily." "Well, Lily," he said, his voice thick with something he couldn't quite control, "this is the most meaningful coffee I've ever received." She smiled brightly, satisfied. The cookie was forgotten. She tugged her mittens back on and walked toward the door. "Thank you," he called after her. She turned once more. "It's okay. Maybe one day I'll be sad, and someone will help me." The bell chimed as she stepped back into the cold. The man remained frozen in place for several seconds. His phone buzzed sharply in his hand. "Mr. Harrington," his assistant's voice said through the speaker. "We located the issue. Your accounts were temporarily frozen during the security review. The transfer cleared. The acquisition went through. Congratulations." Daniel Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Capital, closed his eyes briefly. The transaction in question was worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. His card had declined because of a temporary automated security hold tied to a multi-million-dollar merger. He had more money than he could ever spend. Yet 5 minutes earlier, he had stood in a coffee shop, feeling stripped of dignity. And an 8-year-old girl had handed over everything she had. He looked at the paper cup in his hand. It was simple, light, ordinary. But it felt heavy. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he said into the phone. "Sir, you have investors flying in from. Reschedule them." He stepped outside into the cold. Lily was halfway down the block, her boots leaving uneven prints in the snow. Her coat was too thin. The wind cut through it easily. "Lily," he called. She turned, surprised, then grinned. "Hi, coffee man." He laughed, a sound that startled even him. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed without calculation. "May I walk with you?" he asked. She nodded. They moved slowly along the sidewalk. Snowflakes drifted around them like quiet confetti. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Home. Grandma's making soup. And your parents?" "My mom works," she said simply. "A lot." He studied her profile. There was no complaint in her voice. "Just fact. That dollar," he said carefully. "Was it really your only one?" She nodded. "I was saving for a cookie." He stopped walking. "You gave up your cookie." She shrugged. "Cookies come back every day." He felt that sentence land somewhere deep inside him. Cookies come back every day. In his world, nothing came back. Opportunities vanished. Markets shifted. You won or you lost. Everything was urgency, competition, acquisition. But this child believed in return. In cycles. In abundance that wasn't financial. "Would you let me buy you that cookie now?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" They walked back to the cafe together. This time, when Daniel handed over his sleek platinum card, it worked instantly. He bought Lily her cookie. Then he did something he hadn't planned. "How many prepaid gift cards do you have?" he asked the barista. She blinked. "A few. I'll take them all. And add more." He left enough to cover free drinks for anyone who might one day stand at that counter embarrassed and empty-handed. "For people who need a small coffee," he said quietly. When Lily finally headed home, cookie in hand, Daniel watched her disappear down the snowy street. But the story did not end there. He couldn't forget her words. "Maybe one day I'll be sad, and someone will help me." Over the next weeks, Daniel began seeing the city differently. He noticed the delivery drivers eating alone in their vans. The elderly woman counting coins for a muffin. The exhausted nurse asleep on a subway bench. He started small initiatives through his company: anonymous rent assistance, education funds, community grants. But one thing mattered most. A month after that snowy afternoon, Lily and her grandmother received an envelope thick with official stationery. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Lily, you reminded me what real wealth looks like. I would like to invest in something truly valuable, your future." There was documentation for a fully funded education trust in her name, covering her schooling through university. There was also a new winter coat, bright red and impossibly warm. Her grandmother cried when she read the letter aloud. Lily looked confused. Why would he do that? Her grandmother knelt and held her hands. "Because you gave him something no one else did." "What?" "Kindness without calculation." Years passed. Daniel never tried to take credit publicly. He attended school events quietly, sitting in the back during performances. He watched Lily grow into a thoughtful, determined young woman. On the day of her university graduation, she stood at the podium, her voice steady. "When I was 8, she told the audience, I gave my only dollar to a stranger for coffee. I thought I was just helping someone who looked sad. I didn't know he would change my life." Daniel sat in the front row, older now, his hair touched with more gray. "But the truth is," she continued, "he didn't change my life because he was wealthy. He changed it because he remembered what that dollar meant. It wasn't money, it was hope." The crowd applauded. Daniel held a simple paper coffee cup in his hand. It still tasted like the most important cup he had ever received. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that the smallest act, given freely, can echo further than any fortune.